Thank you both for being here. Let me ask you, I think you were probably both present when the industry testified earlier about the effectiveness of these flame retardants and therefore, by extension, their necessity and usage in homes and clothing and other things. But if I'm hearing both of you correctly, you might both disagree somewhat with that and suggest that any reduction in numbers, and I haven't seen any numbers, nor did they put forward any numbers, but any reduction might be, they're suggesting it might be due to flame retardants, and you're suggesting it might be due to other contributing factors. So do you have any, with regard to your experience, do you have any observations on the effectiveness of flame retardants?
There have been a number of studies, I can't cite them here today, that show that a lot of the products that are being used today for flame retardants are very effective. Some of them are not, and I just can't identify. Being a layman, I'm a backstep fireman, as I like to say. I started on the back end of the truck, risen pretty high, I guess, but I'm not a scientist. I have to rely on the standards making organizations, and we're very involved with the NFPA and other standards making groups in developing these codes, and we rely on the science to design the codes that are in use in this state and in the country.
There has been concern that I've heard expressed about the impact on those people exposed when when products containing fire retardants burn. They produce a very toxic smoke. Is this a concern among those in the fire service, and what is your experience? And obviously, that could be doesn't have to be an industrial type of fire. Even a home is going to contain numerous products that have these flame retardants in them. Has this become a concern over the years?
There's been a real concern over the years. When I started fighting fires, it was what we term a Class A fire. You know, they were plain wool, cotton. There were no chemicals in the home. Today's home is full of chemicals. Never mind the retardants, just the chemicals that are burning themselves give off toxic gases that are harmful to firefighters. In our training classes in OFPC, when I worked there for 12 years, we emphasized that not only during firefighting they should be wearing their self-contained breathing apparatus, but during overhaul, which is checking the fire and making sure that it's been extinguished, and et cetera, and during fire investigation, because we did the arson investigations for the state, we emphasized that they needed to have respiratory protection for that because of the off gases of the burnt product, not only just the fire retardants, but the products that are burning are very chemically involved, and they're harmful to people.
So go ahead.
Could I answer the previous question? The fact that the earlier testimony from the council cited such areas as transportation, building supplies, et cetera, and we are not, the legislation we're focusing on here is primarily that having to do with upholstered furniture and baby products. And I think that was studiously avoided in that discussion as far as the proof of their value. And if you think about baby products, how often is somebody going to drop a cigarette onto a baby product and cause a fire? What are the other ignition sources that can conceivably affect baby products? They're a little bit hard to conceive. As we pointed out, they're less frequent in the home in terms of our eating, cooking, and they're less frequent because of cigarette smoking. Now, we can't say that that is a result of flame retardant chemicals. It's just increasingly unlikely that there is going to be an ignition which will create a fire, which will be something that will kick in the potential value of a flame retardant chemical, which, as we've already discussed, once it breaches the barrier cloth of that upholstery or that product, it's going to release chemicals which are in some ways certainly comparable, if not worse, than the potential impact of the flame.
Thank you.
Yeah, the NFPA is
National Fire
Protection
Association.
Okay, and do they have recommendations on this topic that we should look at?
Well, NFPA, UL, all of the standards and codes making organizations in this country have weighed in on many of these issues that have been discussed here today, including fire retardants and products.
Mm-hmm. And bottom line, would you recommend that we outlaw the use of flame retardants in child products?
In clothing? Yeah, the standard for flammability of clothing was established in 1953. And you'd be shocked to learn that it only is paper or tissue. Strike a match to a newspaper, it'll burn. That's the standard that's established for children's clothing for any textiles in this country, established 1953.
Mm-hmm. If we were to ban the use of flame retardants in children's products, would they still be able to be manufactured consistent with federal standards on flammability?
Sure.
Okay.
We need to ban the novelty lighters. How about that one?
Yeah.
Which children are playing with, and they're setting themselves afire. We just had a fire in Schenectady last month where a 4-year-old child burned his home down with a cigarette lighter.
On the question of whether flame retardants work, your testimony says that they can slow the progress of a fire, at least in early stages. Is that important enough to continue the use of flame retardants in things like furniture, or not?
Well, furniture is a whole different story whatsoever.
Yeah.
We're discovering that the flame retardant that's probably in furniture is not as effective as it was supposed to be. In consumer products such as televisions, monitors, for your computer, and plastic housing for electronics, it's been very effective for internal combustion and external combustion.
Mm-hmm.
So, we just can't. I'm not a scientist. I know what I see burns, and I know what burns very rapidly, and furnishing is one of those things. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that if they follow the same standard the mattress people are doing, they'll reduce the fires dramatically, and it's without the use of chemicals.
I think we should note that many of the major consumer product companies dealing with television sets and computers are reducing substantially their use of flame retardant chemicals, of the particularly the brominated based ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think again we have to look not just at the flammability but at the ignition sources and to what extent, while technically there may be a reduction in the flame,
Mm-hmm.
To what extent is it simply the presence of those chemicals and they're leaching out into the environment a far greater risk than the infinitesimal number that actually become exposed to a flame.
Okay. Just sort of not quite on this immediate topic, but I was impressed when you were saying earlier that when New York finally, in around 06 or 07, passed the fire-safe cigarette legislation?
2000.
In 2000? And that in the intervening years it's been enacted now in every other state?
That's correct. All 49 states have adopted the same, almost practically the same language passed by the state.
Because
The law was carefully designed,
Yes.
and through activists in the field, they made sure that the same language was used in every state. And at a certain point, the industry quietly, because they didn't want to expose the fact that they might have done something wrong before that,
Mm-hmm.
the industry quietly switched its manufacturing process which is pretty simple. It was simply a matter of changing the way they made the paper.
Yeah.
They added certain bands around the cigarette internally so that the ignition stopped
Right.
if it wasn't being puffed on.
No, because
And-
watched for I don't know how many years as my then colleague Pete Granis fought for that legislation year after year after year after year after
18
year.
to be exact.
And, excuse me?
18 to be exact.
And we very often, in our line of work, I guess, wonder, why do we keep fighting for this or that or something else? And then you hear instances like this where, you finally break through the brick wall and the bill becomes law, and to hear that so quickly it was enacted in every other state, and your judgment as to its effectiveness in preventing fires and saving lives is just really dramatic to me.
It's just not my judgment. It's been proven. The first studies are coming out now on the effectiveness of the legislation and the standard, and we've seen a reduction in fatalities and in fires caused by cigarettes.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Just one quick question. You referenced that the furniture, it melts, it pools, and it spreads. And is that different from the flame retardants that we find in the other products? The ones that's in the furniture is very different?
Most of the furniture sold in New York State doesn't have flame retardants. California Technical Bulletin 117, which determines fire retardants in furniture. There's only been a couple of chains that are carrying it here in New York. Most of the other furniture is not being protected.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.